Okay, let's start. So welcome everyone to tryScrum's webinar series. So this is our 61st webinar series, if I'm not wrong. So now we are coming up with Ask Me Anything on Scaling with Venkatesh Rajamani. Right, so we have about so many scaling frameworks in the industry, starting from your Nexus, Safe, Less, and so on. And now Venkat is coming up with something new. So let's see what he's about to share with us. What is the insights that we can get from Venkat as well? So keep your questions ready. Welcome, Venkat, by the way.
Thanks, Arun.
Yeah, bit of a tech setup. All your microphones would be muted and you'll all be and not in the video as well. And then you can use your Q&A window, which will be there on your top of your screen. Actively post your questions. You can start posting your questions as well. You can even use the chat as well. I'll be monitoring the Q&A window and the chats actively, and then you can post your questions, right? And then we try to accommodate as many questions as possible within the time box. Right, and a bit of a background about tryScrum. We are a mission-based organization. Our mission is to humanize organizations. Right, we are a partner network of Scrum.org and also a PTN or RE of Scrum Alliance, ICAJ member organization. We also actively associate with ProKanban and ICF. So that's a brief intro about tryScrum. Bit about tryScrum Studios. We run multiple studios. Role-based studios, we can call it as. We run Scrum Master Studio, Product Owner Studio, and Agile Leadership Studio. And that's a bit of background. And then we are a nominee of World Agility Forum for the community organization for running series of webcasts and meetups throughout 2020 and 2021. Right, so that's a brief about us and about the speaker who's here, who's a CEC, CST, CTC, and also a PST. And then he is an active PhD pursuer. He's due completing his PhD in some time in leadership. So if you have any questions in leadership, you can connect with him in LinkedIn, and then he can also ask you questions in LinkedIn as well. So over to you, Venkat, to start the proceedings.
Okay, so that was very overwhelming for me. When you spoke about scaling frameworks, I got a little fainted because I'm not going to talk about scaling frameworks in the industry saying this framework is good, that is good. So we have a lot of wars going on in a different platform. So we will not have any scaling framework wars in this webcast at least. But the webcast, the idea behind the webcast is to answer as many questions as possible. But before that, we also wanted to introduce there is a better way of doing your scaling approaches, right? Before we get into the discussion, I wanted to ask the audience, when I say scaling, how would you define scaling? What is scaling in your view? Can you please put your responses on the chat window?
Yeah. What is scaling? Just put your response on the chat.
Take a lot of time, so let me use my, okay, this has come now.
Okay, this is the first response: to work as a team on large projects. That's the first response from Smita. Thank you, Smita. There are a few more people typing. So one says business value optimization. That's Kiran. Keep your thoughts coming. Others?
So if all of you on this call can try to put some responses on what do you think scaling is, would be really interesting for us to have more conversations as part of the Q&A as well. I'm not going to talk too many things, too many slides, but I'm going to keep it very short. I'm going to introduce only one way of scaling, and then You can write after directly going to the questions. So we'll wait for one more response, maybe. If you
Sure.
can put one word response is also fine. What scaling is?
Just what comes to your mind when you say scaling, when you hear the word scaling? Alignment
Okay,
across
alignment across
organizations.
all. Okay. So I think partially I agree with your responses. The intention or the outcome towards scaling is alignment, but what scaling itself is mean, there is a lot of misconception in the industry that scaling means adding more people, adding more structures. Maybe typically I used to hear we have been working as a team, 20-member team. We wanted to scale all of a sudden. So we have 200 people now. So let's bring everybody into the container. That is what scaling means in the industry overall when you look at the industry, right? But that is one of the misconceptions. That is not scaling. So in my opinion, scaling means, as somebody said, right, you are trying to accelerate delivery. But when you are trying to accelerate business delivery, you got to retain the agile principles at scale. So we have agile manifesto, we have agile principles. How we are going to retain those agile principles even when we scale, meaning we might scale horizontally or we might scale vertically, right? If you don't understand those terms, that's fine. But the intention is you're able to maintain that speed, you're able to maintain the momentum, you're able to optimize value, irrespective of the size of the organization. You are able to turn on a dime to turn on a dime. That is scaling. In other words, you're able to respond faster even if your size is bigger, right? So there are many approaches to scaling. But when you look at the industry, massively the large scale projects, when you talk about agile transformation today, and when you talk about especially large scale transformation, can somebody guess the success rate of the scaling efforts in organizations? What would be the success rate, do you think, out of 100 when you scale? You can shoot at the dark. You can give me some random numbers out of 100. 20%.
20%.
Okay, it's a good guess.
Can I face 20%? Yeah.
40.
40%. Prabhu says
Not bad.
40%. Yeah.
I would be really, really happy if it is 40% because almost close to half of the efforts, right? But unfortunately, surprisingly, if you look at the large scale efforts, especially on the large projects, when we talk about large scale agile transformation, 52% of those efforts are challenged and 38% of those efforts are a big failure, which means only 10% of the efforts are yielding results that they are intended to. If you look at the latest Standish Group report, the numbers are even more surprising because the intentions behind scaling is surprisingly subtle in many companies. They think that adding more people, more container, bringing a lot of bunch of practices is going to make your scaling work. But what is actually going to happen is it's going to make your scaling even more worse. So when you have a lot of problems in organizations, imagine, and if you are going to scale with those problems, you're actually going to scale problems, not scale value. So if you're intending to scale, let's say you wanted to really accelerate business agility and you wanted to add more people, hypothetically, to accelerate delivery because you have a lot of market demand. First, you got to fix the problem at one team level. So we used to have 4 quadrants. I'm not going to talk about those quadrants in the spirit of time, but if you have one team, one product, if you're able to scale well with that size, if you don't have any problems or challenges, is when it makes sense to add more teams into the container. But when you look at the industry, unfortunately, we might have a misconception that scaling means we got to always add more people, add more structures. We got to do everything on a day one. So what's going to happen in those efforts? The large scale statistics that we have got from the Standish Group. So most of the efforts are going to be a failure. Now, what is the solution for that? One of the misconceptions that I wanted to bust as part of this webcast, maybe scaling could also mean descaling. That's what we are trying to say. So scaling not necessarily mean we are actually scaling. Scaling could also mean descaling. When I say descaling, we are trying to descale the dependencies. We are trying to descale the number of hierarchies. We are trying to descale the structures. Perhaps we are trying to also descale the bureaucracy that is currently existing in your companies. Now, if you look at the overall picture and the trends that the most of the scaling efforts are failing, can somebody guess what is the main reason for scaling efforts to be a failure? We talked about the statistics. Can you put some responses that is coming on your mind? What is the single most reason do you think that the scaling efforts are failing?
One reason that you could think of. What makes scaling challenging, or what is making what is causing the failure of scaling?
Yeah, just look at your organization today. How many scaling efforts that you have come across, maybe in your experience, and how much of those scaling efforts were really a successful effort?
So there are two responses. Company hierarchy is one. Next is purpose of scaling is not communicated clearly, wrong predictions, and dependency management. These are the four responses that we have come. These are the reasons that they think that the scaling is being challenged or it goes to failure.
Yes. So all those challenges or the consequences that you're seeing or the cost for scaling efforts being a big failure is perfectly good. But there is one more problem that I would like to call out is scaling versus scaled efforts. So there is a fundamental myth behind two terms. It might sound very subtle, but it takes a lot of skills and traits to understand this terminology, right? Language matters the most. So there are two things that we are talking about: scaling, scaled. So the moment we approach scaling efforts as scaled efforts, what we are trying to do was from day one, we got to scale. We are scaled. Already we are scaled. As I told you, we are going to scale our problems. We are going to get into the complacency that we already scaled. Okay, hire a bunch of people, launch a few trains. Bunch of people are going to coordinate, do your sprint planning for the next 10 sprints. We are scaled. So we are getting the first step we are getting into the scaling effort is we are thinking scaling as we are not thinking scaling as a continuous journey. We are thinking scaled agility, or already the teams have been scaled, already the efforts have been scaled. We got to stop that, because when we say scaling, it's a continuous process. When we say scaled, we might get into the complacency. I'm not saying we will get into the complacency, but if you look at the large scale projects, most large scale projects are a big failure because they think that if they follow a bunch of practices, a bunch of methodologies, or maybe a bunch of frameworks, they already got scaled. So scaling requires a different mindset. That's a continuous adaptive mindset. Only then, it's not just about the teams or your sprints or your product delivery being adaptive. The whole scaling efforts that we are talking itself should be adaptive. Right? So I'm going to talk one more point on how do you do that. Maybe so a simple technique that I'm going to talk about here is a recent philosophy that is developed by some of the guides in the Scrum Alliance community is called pattern-based scaling. So why and how it is different? We are not going to talk about any frameworks. We are not going to talk about any methodologies or practices or tools, because all these things are required to be scaling, required to scale or to be able to scale your efforts well. Agreed. But the ideology behind this pattern-based approach is that we are going to retain the principles, which means your scaling efforts are going to led by principles, but driven by patterns. You got to introduce some patterns according to the problems that the companies are facing. A pattern is a solution for a repeated problem. So imagine, you are constructing a home, or your car is stuck on a highway, right? there are two options. You have jockeys. There is a manual jockey and there is an automatic jockey. I don't know how many of you know that. So if you go to big industries or big shops, there is an automated jockeys, like where they will place the jockeys at the under the car. They just switch on the motor. It is going to push your car to the level that can be easily done. But the manual jockey is really good. Let's say your car is stuck in the rainwater. Let's say your car is stuck in the skiddy or a slopey environments. It's going to be really difficult. So a pattern is like that. A pattern is a solution for a problem that might be occurring repeatedly. So you continue to improvise the solution based on the experiences you gain. Again, an evidence-based empirical approach. And when you look at the patterns, one blessing about the pattern is you don't have to stuck with one framework or one methodology. You are free to inherit practices from different methodologies or different frameworks, whatever you use in your context. But a pattern is going to be a context specific, is going to look at the patterns inside the company. Let's say what pattern is getting repeated inside the company. Based on that, we are going to apply solutions that is proven in the industry. And while applying that solution, we are going to be led by the principles so that you don't lose your principles when you scale. So let me give you some examples of what pattern in the context of scaling, right? Before I take some questions. You see some of the patterns that I'm showing you, this is coming up from our own research, maybe at tryScrum, feature teams, Scrum of Scrums, lean thinking, feature backlogs, DevOps culture, impact mapping. You must have heard about all these terms. In the spirit of time, we cannot go on explain all these terms, but these are the patterns, and these are the patterns that is useful for recurring problems. Each pattern is going to solve one recurring problems. Imagine you are trying to scale your efforts and you have a lot of patterns in the market. Like you might have got a lot of patterns in the market. So you see different problems in your organizations and you're going to map your problem with a pattern and you're going to apply those patterns as a building block to scale your efforts. So there is nothing like, you got to do X, Y, Z, you got to do A, B, C. No, you look at the problem, you look at the current context that you have been operating, and based on the problem recognition, you are going to choose a pattern that is going to be useful. Right? And what are the different ways you can I'm sorry, so I just gone one level ahead. Okay, so what are the different sources of pattern? Like I have shown you some patterns that is proven, industry proven practices or patterns in the industry that is really a pattern that solves a recurring problem. But you can also discover your own patterns by sourcing patterns from different sources. For example, internal data and metrics is a good source to discover a pattern. And customer feedback is another solution to discover your pattern. Experiments, by conducting experiments, you are going to see a recurring, repeated problem. Only if the problem is going to be recurring, repeated, and you have a proven pattern, you are going to apply that pattern. So imagine if you ask me, how do I go and apply this pattern? Right? Very simple. When you want to apply a pattern, you got to really know whether it is a pattern or an anti-pattern. Because what you think is a pattern might be an anti-pattern. So my suggestion would be you need to definitely have experts consultations when you're trying to pick a pattern for your context specific problems, because you may be thinking this is a problem, but that is not a problem at all, or that may not be a problem at all. There could be a different problem. Because of that, you are facing this problem. So when you're applying a pattern in your context, one thing is really recommended is to look at the system from a systemic perspective. You need to look at your organization as a whole system before applying this pattern, right? Team feedback is also one source of pattern you can certainly go on. And I talked about this, but I will, in the spirit of time, I will try to cover very shortly. So an anti-pattern is, it might look like a pattern, but it is an anti-pattern. So one quick example that I can give, I'm sure everybody can relate in this call, is if you have 10 members in a team working in a product, you may have one product owner. But when 10 members become 200 members, what you would do? Can somebody guess on this call? If you have 10 members working on a product, you have one product owner. And if you have 200 members, you're scaling for some reason, and now you have 200 members working in single product. I've seen most companies go with a simple solution.
20 product owners. Is that right?
We need to give people some time.
How many? Okay, go on. Yes. How many product owners do we think that we go for if there are 20 teams?
Okay,
yeah,
so
productivity reduces. Yes, Tilaka actually said.
Yeah, that's a consequence, but let's
That's a
see.
consequence of absolutely, yes. The question is, Venkat said, if there are 10-member team, we have one product owner. If the team grows to 200 members, how many product owners do we go for? 10 to 20 are definitely needed, as Kiran says. Absolutely, you're a product owner, you should know that as well, Kiran. Prabhu says 10 product owners. Yes.
Yeah. So we say one product goal, one PO, maybe small teams, but all with one product goal. Yes. So you see the easy solution that many companies approach this with. Okay, now we got 200 members. Now we got 400 members. One product owner cannot look after all this 400 members. So we got to have team level product owners. So we categorize and we divide and conquer this problem by bringing a portfolio, program, team, and say team level you have set up product owners, program level you have set up product owners, portfolio level you have set up product owners. And at some point in time, if you look at a company, there will be more product owners than developers, right? So that's not the problem that we have to really solve. By introducing many product owners is not going to solve any coordination or communication problems. It's going to, in fact, bring in a lot of new problems. So that is an anti-pattern example. It might look like a pattern that, oh, let's bring more product owners on board so that we can solve this coordination problem and dependency problem, but that is going to create more problems with respect to the communication delays, because when you add 10 more people into a 20-member team, the productivity is going to come down because they have to establish a lot of communication lines now. And that is going to be even more worse because each team product owners will have to talk to one product owner, and the communication will have to go back and forth, and every team should get the communication cascaded properly. And at the end of the day, if the communication is going to slip, we have somebody to blame. I agree, that's a good solution. We can blame somebody and say, here is the person that's because of him or her, there's a problem. But that's not going to be good for any parties. That's not going to be good for your customers. So that's an example of anti-pattern. Other anti-pattern that I could think of is, these are some of the anti-pattern in scaling. Approaching your scaling efforts in a big bang approach, focusing only on tools, right? Bringing so many tools into one scaling efforts, right? For example, you can say, I'm going to scale. I bring artificial intelligence. I bring design thinking. I bring story mapping. I bring impact mapping, everything into one scaling container. I would say that, yes, now I have a big bang solution for you. But who's going to manage all those? It's going to be really difficult. So what might look as a pattern is actually an anti-pattern. And that is why we got to be really careful about scaling. When we talk about scaling, we need to be really mindful about what kind of practices or methods that we are bringing, whether it is going to create any unintended repercussions. Right? So that's about that. If you want to learn more, you can always look at CAS. The CAS Certified Agile Scaling Philosophy is going to be on the pattern-based mapping. I've shared some of the content from the same workshop. Now, I would be happy to take any open questions if you have, in the spirit of time. I don't want to talk. I don't want to do all the talking. So I wanted to. Did I share my screen when I was showing anti-pattern examples?
You will not.
Yeah, these are the anti-pattern examples that you can imagine.
Okay, so open for questions. You can either post it in the Q&A window or you can post it in the chat as well. I'll be moderating the questions.
Yeah, you can ask me any questions not related to only scaling. If I know, I will surely answer.
Okay, this first question, what is the PO role when it comes to scaling?
So there is no change that is going to come in terms of the PO role when you scale, but except one thing is PO will have to do a lot of delegation. So initially, when a PO is working in a single team, the PO need not delegate too many things to the teams. Of course, he or she can still do, but when you scale, the PO will have to really learn to delegate things to people, because if the PO is going to own everything, that's not going to be realistic. It's not going to be possible. So when you really scale your efforts to accelerate your delivery, the product owners will have to leverage leadership at every level, at every team, and delegate things to the teams that make sense so that the PO can really focus on maximizing the value rather than coordinating with the team members.
Good. I hope your question is answered. Any other questions that we can take from?
So there's a kind of ask me. So I tried to present some information, but initially I would have preferred to get more questions from you than answer that.
Maybe I can throw up a question, Venkat. So this is what I wanted to ask you. So you talked about, see, there are something like in the industry we do like uh, planning at a large scale level for about 3 to 4 months, 3 months timeline. So what do you think of it? Is that an anti-pattern or a pattern?
So it depends on what are you trying to plan. Let's say you're trying to create a large solutions that involves hardware, software, firmware, everything together, and then the size of 3 months plan is really good because you have a complicated solution there. It's not just complex. You have a complicated solution. So in that context, even then the 3 months planning may not be ready, I would say recommended. But if you're going to plan for a long cadence, the only problem is if things are going to change, we will have a lot of rework. And you need to see how often the things are changing in your context. But if you ask me, planning for more than a month is going to really bring in a lot of rework for you. If possible, we have to avoid it.
Okay, so can I consider that a pattern to be like within a month? If you're doing for planning for a month, then it can be considered a pattern. More than that may fall into an anti-pattern.
Good enough. 1 month is good enough. And if you are not able to align different people to that 1 month cadence, then you need to really look at the problem in a different perspective. That is, how can I bring all these people together in a month rather than trying to tweak a lot of things to align with people.
Okay, nice. So if you don't have any questions, I'll quickly give you guys a quiz. And based on that, we can also take the questions as well. So I'm just opening the quiz to be seen. You can take up your mobile phones and then try to scan this, or you can type menti.com and then you can put the pointers like Are you seeing something? You can just scan it and then join the quiz. So you can join the link by scanning the. Are you able? I hope you're all able to see my screen. You can just take out your mobile phones and then scan it. Let me know if there is a challenge in the chat. Please share the code. I'll try to share the code now. Give me a second then. Five, 8, 2, 4. I'm going to share the code now. So you can use menti.com. This is the link that you can use. The code that you can use is 58240493. So you can click the link menti.com and then use the code that I've shared in the chat. Wait for a few minutes for people to join. Type menti.com in your mobiles and then use the code that we have given here. Okay, meanwhile, we have a question, Venkat. We had bigger organizations earlier with successful delivery to customers, but why now scaling term becomes a popular word in industries?
Okay, so let's take a context, right? When you talk about bigger companies, we can always talk about the companies and their success rate for every decade only, because we will not be able to see or sense the company's consistency or sustainability in 1 or 2 years. A company may sustain for 1 year and then the next year they may go off. So if you look at the previous decade, the lifespan of the companies were about 10 to 12 years. That is what the statistics says. But if you look at the current decade, like let's assume the 2010 to 2020 decade, if you look at that, the average span of or average age of companies are coming down. It is 5 to 6 years. Many companies are going out of the market. So the best examples you can think of is so many companies filed bankruptcy. If you look at the banks, especially large number of banks have filed bankruptcy. Why? We have a lot of demand. We have a lot of market opportunity, but many companies are not able to go to the market in a pace that the customer wants. So why scaling become a big topic now is because we wanted to grow our company. Imagine AI also, right? When AI comes, people think many jobs will go off. No, there will be new roles. There will be more people required for new roles and new skills. So when a company is growing at a rapid speed, at the same time, the company size is also growing. At the same time, we need to deliver value faster is the big challenge. So you are able to deliver results in about 6 months. That is not enough. You are able to deliver results in 3 months. That is not enough. So we are expected to deliver rapid results. In fact, every day we are expected to go to the market with some value to sustain the position of company's position. So that is why scaling become a hot topic that, okay, how can I scale my 1 lakh, 2 lakh organizations and yet I can operate like a startup, can deliver value quickly like startups, but my size is going to be big. That is when the scaling picture is coming into play. If you look at any companies in the last, the bond digital companies, they are truly cross-functional. If you take Tesla, you cannot categorize Tesla as a manufacturing company or a technology company. They have everything. So our size is going to grow. At the same time, our expectations to deliver value is going to be very much faster. And that is why, how can you descale yet scale? That question comes. So we are talking about that a lot. That's my view.
Cool. Thank you. So I guess 7 people have joined the quiz. You can also post your questions in the chat while we do the quiz as well. So I'm just gonna open this. You can try to answer. We'll get a leaderboard at the end as well. So what is scaling? That's the first question that we have. Is it adding more people or adding more value? Let's try and see. Last few seconds. Okay, here you go. Most of us got it right. Adding more value, right? Cool. So now let's go to the next question. Right, so if you're ready. Yes, we are in. How can we help the big and complex organizations to be agile? By scaling it or by descaling it? Okay, so typically the problem is, as Venkat was talking about, the problem with big and complex organizations is that they have a lot of hierarchies setting up in the industry. So it's more to do with trying to do descaling first, then go to scaling. That's what the philosophy that Venkat was talking about. So that's where we're heading to, right? Cool. So we're getting into the next question, which is third question. And here you go. The question is, what are principles? Is it like general rules or reusable proven solutions? Okay, so principles are nothing but these are the rules that that helps us like a torchlight that we need to, if you're going in a dark, you can, these principles are like a torchlight which is going to help you understand where we need to head to. So these are like general rules that you can use to, right? The last question we can get to is, what are patterns, if I'm not wrong? That's the question that we have. Yes, what are patterns? Okay, so patterns are reusable proven solutions, like Venkat gave some examples about feature teams and cross-team refinement, scrum of scrums. These are good patterns that you can use in scaling to get the right approach, right? So we have the winner for today is Mars. Someone named Mars. So you're the winner, most of the right answers, and you got it in double quick time as well. So congratulations, Mars, for your answers here. Second position is taken by Centipede, and then third one by some surgical rhino from not. Yes. Cool. So thanks everyone for joining the session today. I hope you had some insights, some takeaways to be taken to your home. And thanks, Venkat, for your time in your busy schedule, allotting 1 hour for the webinar. Thanks, everyone. See you guys next time in some sort of an interesting webinar as well.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Yes.